Welcome to Smart Women Talk. This is your host, Katana Abbott. I'm a midlife millionaire coach and a certified financial planner, and I search the world for smart women and a few good men, including best-selling authors and thought leaders who are on that leading edge. So join us for conversations on money, business, health, and inspiration, so you can live with more purpose, passion, and prosperity. Hi, everyone. This is Katana Abbott, and I want to welcome you to Smart Women Talk. I am so excited for this show. We have 76 million baby boomers who are determined to live life to the fullest. We never want to get old. We never want to see ourselves as old either. So how do we stay fit as we age? Today, we're going to be speaking with fitness expert and founder of Flipping 50, Debra Atkinson. We will share with you the exercise priority that will determine independence as we age, and how to measure the success of an exercise program and the signs that your exercise program is not working. Let me tell you about Debra Atkinson. She is a returning guest. She is a hormone balancing fitness expert, and she has helped more than 250,000 women flip their second half with energy and vitality. She's a best-selling author of You Still Got It, Girl, the After 50 Fitness Formula for Women, and Hot, Not Bothered. Debra hosts Flipping 50 TV and the Flipping 50 podcast, which is an AARP top podcast for adults 50 plus, with over 2.5 million downloads. Her TEDx talk is Everything Women in Menopause Learned About Exercise May Be a Lie. And Debra is the creator of the first and only hormone balancing fitness membership exclusively for women in menopause. So I had to share that whole bio because, wow, you do so much. You have to be fit to be doing all that. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure I could say the same back at you if I were reading your bio. We don't give ourselves enough credit. Oh, I think it's not something that you can't step up to. If it's something that you feel like this is your purpose, it's more try to hold me back. I couldn't not do it.
And it's interesting you say that, because I know most of our listeners are over 50 now. We've been doing this 15 years. It seems as I have aged, my listeners have aged too. And I'm noticing we're all in that second and third chapter of our life, let's say, right? What would you say are the biggest mistakes that women our age make trying to stay healthy and stay fit?
Ironically, it is that we're overdoing it. I think we've listened to memes, we've listened to recommendations for years that it's more exercise, less food. That dogma really needs to stay in the 80s, wherever it was born, but we're overdoing it. And for women in midlife, especially if they're in perimenopause, when they're much more volatile, it's a roller coaster ride. You may be cycling, you may not be cycling, you may think you're done cycling and not be done cycling. It's when the pandemic actually changed things cycle wise for an awful lot of women who thought they were in postmenopause and then had breakthroughs. So I think stress is a huge thing, and it affects our cycles, it affects our hormones. And at midlife, we have to remember that exercise is a stressor. And if we don't remember that foundational piece, we don't realize that when other things in our lives are highly stressful, maybe it's finances or relationships or caregiving, or we truly are the sandwich generation between younger adult children potentially, or let's face it, a woman in her 50s can have a kindergartner. It's 2023. And then we've got aging parents or even grandparents, depending on your birth order. There's a lot going on, and exercise is just another stressor. So we need to potentially do more or less based on also a factor of what's happening in our lives in order to keep this balance we need. That's a homeostasis where your body will actually be at its optimal health.
I do worry about people that overexercise. How can that actually happen? Is it doing bad things in the hormones?
Absolutely. And that's really one of the ways to know. How do you know if you're overdoing it? Number one, for a woman specifically in menopause, you're probably gaining weight as opposed to losing it, especially if that is your goal. You're probably depositing belly fat. Even if you're not gaining weight, it will relocate. And that's due to the cortisol largely, but cortisol also spikes blood sugar. And we combine cortisol with insulin, and the two of them are what we call belly fat bullies. They will relocate fat from other areas to the belly. And that's where it actually not only becomes a nuisance, nobody loves that. Nobody loves the waistline that's expanding, but it's also a health risk while it's there. So we want to watch that very carefully. And if you feel like you could take a nap at the end of an exercise session, it's too much. So we've actually taxed our adrenals. Now, exercise, I mentioned, is stress, right? So we do want a calculated stress. We want to plan what kind of a stressor, and we want a perfect Goldilocks hormetic stressor in order to support relaxation afterwards. In fact, a lot of women use their exercise to negate their stressors. So it can be stressful to tell them, back off, you need to do a little bit less. And they'll wonder, what am I going to do with all of this angst and this energy that I've got? So read a good book, take a good bath. That's one or two. But we've got to look at what's the result. So if you're not having more energy because you exercised, and if you are wanting to nap afterward, those are big signs. We're probably actually doing more damage. And that's just a whisper. Somebody's tapping you on the shoulder. But if you don't listen, it gets louder. And the fatigue or the exhaustion generally get worse. And if you don't take the break, something will give you a reason to take a break. So I think we all know that we've experienced that. If you're not paying attention when you have the sniffles, a lot of times it will get worse. So those things specifically, but the biggest thing is if you're really monitoring what's going on. And we're here doing Smart Women Talk. Everyone, I think, needs a smart scale right now. So we measure, and sometimes subjectively, we're terrible at measuring what is our toleration of stress, because women are, you can count on me, I'll get it done, people. And we've always been that for everyone. And so sometimes we don't recognize ourselves when our physiology is not accepting that stress. So measuring what is happening with your body composition, what's happening with your lean muscle mass, because we absolutely, at this point in our lives, don't want that number to go down. We need that muscle your 85-year-old self will thank you for.
Okay, you just mentioned something, our 85-year-old self.
Yeah.
I'm applying for Medicare right now. And that means that in 15 years, Debra, I'm going to be 80. It's hard to even say it. And then I got really depressed about it because I don't want to be a bad 80. I want to be an awesome 80. What is actually possible for someone who's my age, or let's say 45, when we're planning for retirement? What can we expect to actually be like when we're 80 or 90 years old? Because what we see in nursing homes and that is so scary.
So true. And one of the challenges that we have right now is we're it. We will be it. We are raising the roof. We're raising the glass ceiling. And unfortunately, for most of us, in our parents, we've seen what we don't want. And that's all we've got. There are very few, but they're out there. I have a history of doing triathlon. And one of the things I love about triathlon is the triathlon community. And it's completely probably the opposite of what many people would expect. So at an Ironman triathlon, you will see a potluck of people, all shapes and sizes and all ages. But right now we have, and there are a select few that everybody's talking about because it's not the norm, it's the exception to the rule. But there are 85 and 90-year-olds opening up new age groups and finishing Ironman distance. And this is like they allow you 17 hours, just to give you an idea if you're not familiar. It's a really long day, but it's possible. And that's what we're seeing. And I think we see this in timelines on social media. A 100-year-old woman crosses a finish line, or a 102-year-old woman finishes a marathon, or she's 92. We see these people and we're sharing it because it's giving us hope. We all want to believe that could be us. But today is the day that we're laying that foundation. Today is the day we're beginning to save the muscle and the bone and be very wise about what are we doing. So there are a couple of things exercise wise that we've got to make sure we're doing and make sure we're not doing, like exercising to exhaustion. So the sweet spot that's very true for us is that we can always increase inflammation if we're doing too much. We can impose that on ourselves in a way that becomes much more negative.
So when you just said inflammation, isn't inflammation the cause of pain, and it's the cause of most disease, or it's part of disease like cancer, diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, cancer, all that stuff?
Absolutely. There are ways that you can offset that with your diet, but I think we also want to look at the oxidation that happens. And that word is used a lot when we're talking about aging. The oxidative process, when we're exposed to the more oxygen we consume, there's more going through, your body is performing more and more. And if we think there may be a wear and tear and the vehicle only has so much use, we've begun now to think that's not true. We could age to 120 or 140 and that would be possible. But it's not possible if we're not taking care of ourselves in a way to lead it. So cardiovascular exercise is actually one of the worst. And we know to increase cortisol, to even for women in midlife and beyond, there's a 40-minute mark where cortisol tends to continue to elevate and rise. And we know in a lot of shorter exercise sessions, in interval training even, or in strength training, cortisol rises and falls as it should. But in longer endurance exercise, and that line of demarcation seems to begin at about 40 minutes. Now, the more trained you are, the later that's probably going to happen, but it still is going to happen. And if we combine length of workout with intense workout and intensity level, that's probably going to increase the inflammation that applies during that session. So the more oxidation that occurs, the faster we're aging. So we want to be careful. And do we want cardiovascular exercise for our hearts? Absolutely. We just want to find the Goldilocks, the sweet spot, not too much, not too little. And the energy level should be there. And that muscle mass should be increasing or at least staying the same. So we have to pay attention to that.
I have a friend, a woman that is part of our little group, and we've been meeting for 2 years, and she inspires her so much because every single day she walks 4 miles, and she's 67. She looks 50. I have no idea how old you are, but if you've been doing this for 40 years, honey, you look fantastic because you look 40. So maybe you started as a baby. But her mother is in her 80s, and she has the same thing. She walks every day, and she has been her whole life. And she just married a guy in his early 70s.
Good for her.
Maybe younger. And walking would be cardio, but it's also good for the bone. Maybe we all need to rethink. So for all of us here in the audience, can you just walk us through like an ideal exercise routine for the week?
Absolutely. So number one, the first priority, the biggest priority is strength training. So if you're not doing resistance training, that's number one. So again, we start losing muscle mass at 30. And we've got to finish this sentence and say, if we're not doing something about it. And the two somethings are 1, resistance training, and 2, eating adequate protein. Those 2 things were very key. And for most of us who are in our 50s and 60s, we didn't start strength training in our 30s, we were still thinking that was something for men. We didn't want to bulk up. There are some, not all, right? But the majority of us need to get started. The best time was then. The next best time is today. We know from studies that have been out for decades that even women wheelchair bound in their 90s can gain strength from lifting weights. But the crucial distinction is you'll gain strength, but not muscle mass. So if you're a woman in midlife struggling with body composition issues, part of it is by now you've been losing muscle mass for 2 decades, and that is often replaced by fat. It's not an exchange, but you slow your metabolism if you lose muscle. And you also are less motivated to do more spontaneous activity during the day. You're sitting more voluntarily. Things don't sound as appealing to you to do because you lose energy. We're tending to gain fat. We tend not to push ourselves away from the table any more readily, right? There's still that enjoyment of food and social life, and sometimes more as we age. Strength training, first of all, twice weekly. And twice, a lot of people will say, but 3 times, I thought. 2 and 3 times have shown almost equal results and benefit. And the women that I work with in midlife often show up and they're already tired all the time and fatigued because of, again, we serve so many people. So we opt for the least amount of physical exercise. We want you exercising or active all day. We want you to feel like going and doing the garden, playing another 9 holes, going for a longer walk with the dog or a walk with a partner after dinner. But often if someone has exercised and they're already feeling tired, they will rather lie on the couch than do those things. It's our activity level all day that actually counts more toward our overall health and wellness. So it's exercise enough so that you want to move all day, every day. That's the real goal. So twice weekly strength training, and allows enough recovery. And this is a really important one. The fitness happens between exercise, not while we're exercising. We're breaking down muscle when we exercise. There is not at least 48 hours. And for women over 40, we like to see, and often it feels better to them to wait 72 hours. So no more Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it's Monday, Thursday. And you're giving yourself a little wider time. You're not as sore, you're not as fatigued, and you're completely ready to do more, probably, and lift a little heavier.
And I think we need to have someone like you helping us, because when I was using the Peloton app and doing the arm exercise, I was fine. But then when I thought, I'm just going to sit on my exercise bike and I'm going to do the weights while I'm riding, I pulled something in my arm. Yeah. And it's been really hard to get my strength back in that right arm now. Yeah. So what do you say about that? Because, Debra, some women are afraid to do it.
Legitimately.
It's just like they injured themselves.
Yep. And most of us at this point have had some kind of an injury, or we've got maybe a condition, little arthritis, or a little less cartilage than we have. We've had a good life, right? And we're not done. It's only halftime. I think we've got to remind ourselves we've got a lot of good years left. So we're learning how to do it correctly. And this is where there's a love-hate relationship with all of the free exercise videos on YouTube. And that is that you may know you need to strength train, but randomly finding an exercise is not necessarily the same as hearing exactly where you need to start, knowing exactly how you should feel it, where you don't want to feel it, how to modify if that one doesn't work. Everybody needs a user manual. So if you're not quite sure what that looks like for you yet, working with somebody one-on-one, or somebody who's going to whisper that in your ear before you to ask. That's the real question. The base foundation for all of us, you already mentioned, it's walking. Or anyone who's got an ankle, a knee, or a hip issue who's saying, but I can't, your equivalent of walking, that may mean riding a bicycle, or you on your elliptical trainer, or you on your rebounder. So it's a softer impact, but regular movement. And in this, we're not talking necessarily even about walking briskly. It's getting out and doing that movement on a regular basis according to your first priority. For women who are needing to lose belly fat and finding that there's a little more padding in the cushions right now, and they used to have an easy time managing weight but aren't. Insulin resistance is something that we hear about pretty frequently, and muscle supports the reduction of insulin resistance. In other words, it makes you more sensitive to insulin because it absorbs blood sugar. So not only the strength training you're doing uses blood sugar, but you're creating muscle now that uses blood sugar all day, every day. So you don't have so many spikes. Your body is actually now removing that blood sugar that is natural and a normal process after meals easily because you've got more muscle mass. That's an important thing. Walking doesn't have to be high intensity. It doesn't have to be brisk. It could be brisk, but it's also just going out and moving anytime during the day, short, long, moderate, all distances count. But that's your foundation. Every day moving in that way, strength training twice weekly. And then for those women who would say, I'm sleeping really well, I have really good energy, is there anything more I can do? High intensity interval training is actually very appropriate. And I think I'll be saying this, I hope, to this generation until we die. We should be doing this. There's not ever going to come a day where we don't need reaction skills, which often come in when you're moving quickly in order to get breathless. But we also are able to push something that we call VO2 max. It's like, how well can you use oxygen? What's your oxygen carrying capacity? And we lose that in our mitochondria as we age. And when you start feeling a little more fatigued, or you go upstairs and you're breathless and never used to be, that in part is a reduction of mitochondria. But we know that 70-year-olds can get the mitochondria of 20-year-olds if they're exercising correctly. So it's not just exercising, but specifically looking at doing the strength training, the base foundation, and getting breathless regularly a few times a week.
How do we do this and put it into our life? Do you have a suggestion for that?
I think the easiest thing is one thing at a time. I just mentioned walking as a foundation, twice weekly strength training, and 2 or 3 times a week doing high intensity interval training. But if all of those things are new, you start with one, and always the walking would be first. And you're looking to establish that daily habit, ideally at the same time every day. So it's just like walking into the kitchen for most of us and turning on that coffee maker is automatic. And if that's not it for you, there is some habit that is probably your morning ritual, but you want it to be as necessary as that for you, as automated, and then move on to the next one. The other way is what I call January 1sting yourself, right? Where we turn the world upside down and we change 17 habits all at once. And by week 2, we're done. Yeah.
You're right. You can't do everything in one day, but I love this. The walking, I guess we can do. And if the weather's bad, then we can do something indoors. I do a 15-minute workout in the morning on the bike, and I get my heart rate up to 150. I don't know if you think that's good.
Yeah. And to answer the question about, is 150 good? No one can really answer that for you. So without having tested you, we don't know how you respond, right? We don't know what's your range and zone. But if your goal then is to do intervals where you're getting breathless, the question is, are you breathless? Are you getting breathless? Because that doesn't lie. No matter what your heart rate is, everyone can say, yes, I was, or no, I wasn't. And likewise, if you're going for a walk and the real benefit for you today is to decrease your cortisol levels, are you walking at a pace where you can hold a conversation very easily with someone else? Then you're probably reducing your cortisol level. But if you're out of breath and feeling anxious, it may be too much for the goal you have today. It's always, what's my purpose in the way I'm exercising today? And if you have that, you're much further along in terms of getting the results that you want.
Was it, if your heart rate is high, is our goal to bring that down as we get healthier, the heart rate would be lower?
Not necessarily. The work may need to be higher in order to get your heart rate up later. Unfortunately, the more fit you are, it's going to take more to get you to that higher level where you are breathless. So you will recover faster. That's a measure of fitness. What gets you breathless right now, and then what allows you to recover, if it may be 30 seconds or 3 minutes that it takes you to recover. When you first start, it's probably going to be a little bit longer in terms of recovery. The faster you bounce back, the more resilience you have. That's a sign you're getting much more fit.
You mentioned resilience just now, and then I want to go back to this idea of interval training, because I'm really not real sure what interval training is.
Interval training is actually doing a progressive warm up. So you're going to start from resting, and we're going to elevate the heart rate, and the circulatory system gets started. So you're breathing a little harder. But the interval training is really doing a very hard, short-term burst of exercise. This is where we're getting breathless. We might be jumping rope. We could be on that Peloton going really hard for 30 seconds and then backing off so that the heart rate recovers. We can close our mouth and breathe entirely through the nose. And that's your sign you're fully recovered. And then you might go again. There may be 4 different hard recovery interval patterns in an interval training workout, and then a cool down. So it may be 15 minutes, it may be 20. And the harder it is, the more you're doing this real true interval training, the shorter the session is. And that was one of the biggest draws and benefits when interval training first came out. Is every fitness and health professionals know this, and probably this. If you're watching, the number one obstacle is time for everyone. There may be a motivation period too, but time is usually the biggest obstacle for us exercising. So when we said suddenly you don't have to go to an hour, you can get this done in 15 or 20 minutes, it got very much more attractive and doable to people. And you don't have to do it as often. We find the same fitness results come in smaller packages and doing them less frequently, because actually you need to recover fully. And if it's high intensity, you need a little longer recovery period.
What I'm hearing from most people is in the morning. Do it first thing in the morning before you end up on your computer or heading out to do whatever you do during the day.
Getting it done in the morning means we will get it done before we get too many interruptions. But to women, I would also say that our cortisol levels are naturally higher in the morning. And if you exercise, especially if it's intense exercise early in the morning, you're working with your hormones as opposed to against them. High intensity exercise later in the day can actually be anti-productive for stress levels and potentially for sleep or sleep quality. So intense early, light late is one of the tenets of Flipping 50.
What would you say to a woman if she isn't disciplined to work out?
I think a lot of people think I'm not disciplined, or I'm not motivated, or I have no willpower. And to that, most of the time, I will say the goal is to find something that you love doing. And that might be an activity that you love doing, but it also might be something you love doing that is empowered by the fact that you are stronger or that you have more endurance and stamina, so that you're actually working to that end goal that you love. There are a lot of people I've worked with over 40 years who we've had a love-hate relationship, meaning they hate to see me coming and love to see me going, right? and that never changed. And unfortunately, not everybody will have the same love and enjoyment for physical activity, but we all have this bone, this muscle, and these brains that need exercise. And there's so much science to prove to us that we can change the way we age by changing the way we exercise.
As a fitness expert, what is the biggest fear that you find women are telling you?
Losing our independence. Really, I think all of us we've been in this habit of we serve other people, we do for other people. It's very hard, I think, for many women to ask for help, from someone else or to accept it. And I think just the fear that we will be dependent on someone else, not be the doer, and lose access to our cars. That was a hard one for my mom, I know. Lose our homes and be in someone else's facility, not in charge of our own schedule. I think that's probably the worst.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that is so true. So what would you say is the number one thing women should do? I know you actually have a free gift for our listeners, right? I want to give everyone like an action step of something that they can do.
Yeah, so we call
right
it
now, something easy.
Everything in our world we call a flip. So the 5-day flip is really stick your toe in the water. And I give 5 days of exercise videos in a row. And in addition to that, I give you an audio. So I'm whispering in your ear why today matters and how it's impacting not just your muscle and your bone, but in doing that, or in order to do it, it's positively impacting your hormones. So you can tie the two together, but these are 15 to 20 minute at most. Doable, almost no equipment at home. I'm doing it in my living room with you. So that's a great way to start. And really at the end of the day, you're proving to yourself that 5 days in a row, I do have time to do this. I have time to do something. And it's just a getting started step.
It would be great if everyone who's listening does this. Just does it for 5 days and sees what happens. How do they feel? What are the little changes that are happening? So I have the website here, and it's flipping50.com. For those watching the video, you can see it right there on the screen, but it's flipping50.com. I already went and signed up, and I saw you had something in there about fasting. So you're going to help us address the whole diet thing too, it sounds like.
Yes, on a subliminal level, and we just talked about not flipping your world upside down. If the exercise and starting that is enough, keep your blinders on. You don't have to use that fasting information. It's optional. So it's there if you want it.
Wonderful. Thank you. We love to end the show with a Smart Women tip. And what is the one lifestyle tip that you can leave us with?
Absolutely. So when we talk about fitness, and if I had to choose two, we've already really emphasized the benefit of strength training because we need muscle, and many of us are concerned about bone density. Strength training is a girl's best friend. Walking is a start, but it's not enough. But none of those things will work unless we're sleeping. Prioritize your sleep.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been absolutely wonderful. Okay, everyone, thanks for coming to join us. I know you enjoyed the show. And if you want to even go deeper with our guests and have articles from them, be invited to events, and know who's coming on the show, go to joinsmartwomen.com. So until our next show, go out and live with more purpose, passion, and prosperity. Smart Women Talk is brought to you by Smart Women's Empowerment, a 501c3 nonprofit project of United Charitable. Music by Bill Lucas from his album When It Rains. Available on Apple Music and Spotify. Catch us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, and be sure to join our free community at joinsmartwomen.com to access all our free Smart Women resources.